It's been a project for many years to recognize the contribution of two members of this meeting. The one, of course, is the more famous John Woolman, who never was inside this building. He died before it was born, but I'm sure he knew about it because they planned it for many years before they built it. But the other lesser-known figure is a gentleman named William Boen, who was African American, who was a slave, who was a good friend of Woolman's, and who was part of the continuing revelation that occurs, that has occurred here at Mount Holly meeting. So we finally got the path built. We finally got some benches as a contemplative area, and we have some facsimiles of what the signs will look like as soon as they come from the manufacturer, which should be any day now. And I encourage you to take a walk all the way around. It culminates at the far end of the parking lot.
So, I am Carol Walls, a member of this meeting, and my husband Jack and I were directors at the John Woolman Memorial here in Mount Holly for over 20 years, but not now. And I was asked to speak briefly about John Woolman. So, John Woolman was one of the most influential ministers in the Religious Society of Friends. And he was born in Quakers, right next door, in 1720. And he lived all of his adult life in Mount Holly. The historian Jerry Frost said of John Woolman that until him, Quakers had an anti-war testimony. And it was John Woolman who turned that into a peace testimony. And so I want to just say a little bit about what he did. He's best known for his lifelong work to end slavery and for his journal, which was published 2 years after he died in 1774. That was 1 year before the meeting house was built or completed. And in the journal, Woolman guides the reader on an inward journey to discover the firm foundations for outward action and oppression of all kinds, using his own life as an example. The journal contains descriptions of his experience of God's love, and his resulting understanding of the interconnectedness of all life. And here is a quote. "I was early convinced in my mind that true religion consisted of an inward life, wherein the heart doth love and reverence God, the Creator, and learn to exercise true justice and goodness, not only toward all men, but also toward the brute creatures. That to say, we love God as unseen, and at the same time exercise cruelty toward the least creature moving by his life, was a contradiction in itself." John became a recorded minister at the age of 22, and for the next 29 years, he traveled in the ministry throughout the American colonies and eventually to England. And during that time, he averaged about 1 month away from Mount Holly, visiting families, meetings for business. He visited the Delaware Indians in Wyalusing beyond the frontier, which was then in Allentown, Pennsylvania, at Fort Allen. He went to Nantucket Island and met with the wives and mothers of the whalers, and he told them that they should live more simply so that their kinfolks didn't have to spend so long away chasing the whales that were becoming scarce. He went to Rhode Island and persuaded the Quakers there to petition the legislature to end the slave trade in Rhode Island, which was a major location. On southern plantations, he told slaveholders that they could afford to pay people to work for them if they lived a less extravagant lifestyle. He also talked with them a lot about how their children would benefit from having a real role in life and not being in charge of people who knew more than them. In England, he said that really nicely, I gotta say. In England, where the profits of the triangle trade had built large cities, he described the conditions under which the sugar in their tea had been produced and the cotton in their clothing. He had seen it directly in his southern journeys, and he was a really good storyteller. People generally did not forget stories that Woolman had told. Through direct conversations, public speaking, and the publication of his essays, he was able to change people's hearts and minds. He also boycotted products made by the labor of enslaved people and used every opportunity to explain the reasons why he did not use cotton, silver, rum, sugar, or dyed clothing. Making sure that people understood the suffering involved in producing these products. And he helped others realize their complicity in slavery, even if they did not directly enslave anyone. John Woolman addressed many issues in his ministry, but slavery was there from the beginning to the end. It was it was always with him. He engaged in loving dialogue with those with whom he disagreed. He did not let friendships stop him from raising concerns with those close to him when it was necessary, and he listened. He didn't blame or demonize others, and he reminded, and this is the biggest thing, he reminded them of God's love and care for them. Here is an example of one of those conversations from the journal. He didn't often say exactly how he did it, but this is one of the closer ones, so I'm going to read it to you. A neighbor received a bad bruise in his body, someone in Mount Holly, and sent for me to bleed him, which being done, he desired me to write his will. I took notes, and amongst other things, he told me to which of his children he gave his young Negro. I considered the pain and distress he was in and knew not how it would end. And so I wrote his will, save only that part concerning the slave, and carrying it to his bedside, read it to him, and then told him in a friendly way that I could not write any instruments by which my fellow creatures were made slaves without bringing trouble on my own mind. I let him know that I charged nothing for what I had done and desired to be excused from doing the other part in the way he proposed. Then we had a serious conference on the subject, and at length he agreeing to set her free, I finished the will. By his mid-30s, Woolman's writings began to supplement his in-person efforts. In 1754, his first essay, Some Considerations on the Keeping of Negroes, was published and distributed more widely than any previous anti-slavery work. That same year, Woolman composed a strong anti-slavery epistle that was sent from the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting to all Quaker groups in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. His friend Anthony Benezet quoted from Woolman's first essay in his own writings and amplified its impact. And when Philadelphia Yearly Meeting sent the 1754 epistle to London Yearly Meeting, they included Woolman's essay with it. And so that set up this back and forth between Philadelphia and London, where they shared their epistles and built on them. And when one took a step, the other was like challenged to do it too. And Benezet knew all of the leaders, was connected with the leaders of Europe. He was also taking these materials throughout Europe and broadening the anti-slavery movement. 2 years later, in 1756, John Woolman decided to give up his growing retail dry goods store down on Mill Street here in Mount Holly and make a more modest living as a tailor and orchardist. Woolman was able to free up time to write and travel in the ministry. That same year, he began writing a journal intended for publication. And he begins it by saying, I have often felt a motion of love to leave some hints in writing of my experience of the goodness of God. And now, in the 36th year of my age, I begin this work. Woolman's journal focuses on his travels and ministry and shows how to bring injustices to light when they are not widely recognized. He looked deeply to understand the causes of war and injustice. At Woolman's urging, in the next year, in September, Philadelphia Yearly Meeting adopted a formal minute urging all Quakers to free their slaves and arranging for visitation of slaveholders within Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, and requiring that anyone who bought or sold slaves be excluded from participating in Quaker meeting for business. Following this decision, Woolman and several other Yearly Meeting Quakers were delegated to visit slaveholding families to convince them to free the people they enslaved. And this project continued for the rest of Woolman's life. He spent a certain amount of time every year, especially in the winter time, making visits to families within Pennsylvania and New Jersey who owned slaves. I think I'm going to stop there. And are there questions?
I meant to say that in my talk that Woolman was a great example of love and power because he wasn't opposed to pressuring people, but he did it with love. So thank you for making that point.
I next am going to introduce Al Corbett, who you already know. And Al is going to talk about William Boen.
Good evening, it's not evening yet. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you all here to celebrate this 250th anniversary of Mount Holly meeting with us. Just before I start, if I say anything to make you feel bad or hurt your feelings, blame Bill Robinson. I give you permission to get tomatoes to throw at him because he drafted me for this job and I was trying my best to get out of it. But it was a subject that both Bill and I started a few years ago. We were trying to get a bench. I forgot the name of the project, but it was a famous poet that had the bench on the side of the road, and we submitted the application and never heard, actually COVID hit about that time, and we never got any feedback from anyone. So we didn't get that bench, but Bill continued the effort to make some kind of recognition of William Boen here at Mount Holly. Now, I first heard about William Boen from Carol and Jack. Jack was telling me about William Boen, and I was like, I never heard of him. And he was telling me about his whole story. And so I'm going to share some of the information that I have about William Boen with you. Before I start about William Boen, I always like to give some factoids about slavery. In all my presentations, I do presentations on Woolman, Underground Railroad, and so forth. And I like this factoid. And Lincoln said this, with malice towards none. So I look at life without malice toward anyone. I look at life as far as this is history, this is what happened, and I need to understand it to have a better world. If I don't understand it, it will repeat. The old saying, the history repeats itself. So in 1452, Pope Nicholas V came out with this bull. And what this bull did was start what I consider to be European slavery, where the Europeans was given the permission to enslave anyone and take their property. And the interesting thing about that was that it was a perpetual covenant that they established with slavery. The reason why I like to start that, because we don't always understand the history of how did we get here, why was there any need for abolitionists or the Underground Railroad or any of that stuff, but that's pretty much where it started. Now, earlier we heard Ms. Flanagan talk about the Quakers in Europe. Well, the Quakers in Europe were the target of the Anglican Church and the Catholic Church. Why? Because they weren't Catholic. They were not like anyone else of their day. And so they were a target. I don't know if you're familiar with the series of movies called John Wick, but in John Wick's movie, they say, John Wick's excommunicado. And I was like, what does excommunicado mean? Well, I was happening to do some research on the European Quakers. Guess who the first people to be excommunicado was? The Quakers. Why? Because of what Ms. Flanagan said. They were non-cooperative. They didn't want to pay tithes. They weren't going along with the established church. They were fighting against what we would consider today the system. Very important factoid, because that's what led many of them to come to the United States. Now, why is that important, especially to anyone of African American descent? Again, Ms. Flanagan alluded to it. If it had not been for the Quakers, we wouldn't have had abolitionists, Underground Railroad, and when I grew up, they gave the credit to Lincoln for freeing the slaves. Well, when you look at manumissions, it started with the Quakers. It didn't start with Lincoln. Lincoln wasn't even born then. So there's the history of Quakers being resolute in solving problems, especially social, or not necessarily social issues. Let's use the word spiritual issues. And the spiritual issues come in the sense of love God with all your heart and love your brother as yourself. This was the issue that the Quakers had to deal with inside themselves in dealing with slavery, because just like the rest of the Europeans, Quakers have had slaves. And I didn't understand that point until I read a book by Dr. Jean Sutherland, and she's done some fantastic research on Quakers and slavery. And she got the statistics there. You see how many Quakers own slaves and where they own slaves at. So that shocked me, because I started on the Underground Railroad where Mrs. Calloway had this list of abolitionists. And one of the abolitionists she had was John Woolman. And so I said, I got to find out who this John Woolman guy is, because I done heard so much about him being an abolitionist, and he travels from New England to North Carolina, where I'm from, telling the Quakers to give up their slaves. And I said, wow, that's a little bit different. Where did he get that chutzpah to go tell other Quakers, y'all wrong? And so that led me to wanting to know more. I went to a World Quaker Day, and there was another event that I spoke at. I think, Jack, you were there. And what did you tell me, Jack, about what I had spoke about?
I I said that God told me to tell you that you were speaking God's words.
Okay, it's Jack's fault
Woolman.
that I'm here today and that I've been here in Mount Holly for all these years because he said God said. What can I do with that? So when I met Jack and Carol and they started telling me about their work at the Woolman Memorial, that's when I found out about John Woolman's friend, William Boen. So William Boen was born in 1735. He died in 1828, I think it was. I got it here somewhere. And I was like, oh wow, that's an interesting thing. So I went to Haverford or Swarthmore, and I found this pamphlet that was talking about Woolman, not Woolman, but Boen. And I said, oh, this is interesting. And in the pamphlet, they asked him questions about his life and who he was, and they give you the information and the background on William Boen. So I want to share some of the things that I highlighted about William Boen today. So in his lifetime, he was born 1735. He succeeded at reading and writing, which is another interesting point, because it was illegal to teach slaves how to read and write. Who was these people that were teaching them how to read and write? He earned his freedom. William Boen and Woolman were similar in the sense that they had an epiphany. There was something that happened to them that totally changed their lives. Carol mentioned the fact that the slave girl came to his friend came to him and wanted to do the bill of sales. Well, Boen was out in the wilderness chopping trees, and he heard this audible, unaudible voice, who knows, but it was something that he heard that says, William, don't chop that sycamore tree over there. Don't chop that buttonwood tree down. Do as I tell you. And he was like, what? Who is this? What am I experiencing? And so he said that he heard the second master. He had already had a human master, but he had a second master. That was the epiphany. And he was scared because he knew he was going to get in trouble, but he listened to that inner voice, that inner witness that he had and said, don't chop that tree down. Well, long story short, he ended up getting manumitted. He ended up earning his freedom. And so he was attending Mount Holly. Now earlier I told you, I'm going to tell you like, oh my gosh, what's his name? The great communicator, anyway. But anyway, he said this, the rest of the story. Y'all know who I'm talking about now, right? Paul Harvey, thank you. And so the rest of the story about William. This is the interesting part, and this is the sad part about William, in my opinion. So William wanted to get married, and Mount Holly wouldn't allow him to get married in Mount Holly. Why couldn't William get married in Mount Holly? This is a Christian organization, and we're supposed to be kumbaya, love our brother as ourselves. But there was a problem that covered any religion of that day, and that's where I brought in the slavery thing. The norm of that time was slavery was okay. No matter what church you went to, slavery was what was allowed, what was permitted. And so Mount Holly had these people in the group, not all of them, but some of them, who said, ain't happening here. But he had a friend who was like him named John Woolman, who said, guess what, dude? We're going to Peachfield. I got a cousin that's got this big house. We're going to give you a wedding, no matter what these people at Mount Holly say. And that's where you separate social justice from spiritual justice, and people who have the spirit to understand what God's will is in doing what's right. Because Woolman saw that he was a person just like he was that was entitled to be married. So he got married by his friend at Peachfield, which is a part of his story, which is a part of his timeline. Now, the other thing that happened to William Boen that wasn't too pleasant, in my opinion, was that Quaker patients stepped in, and William applied for application to become a Quaker here at Mount Holly. William, we just had the business meeting. Nope, can't do it. Try again next year, but we want you to be faithful. and just commit to coming to Mount Holly no matter what. I said, okay, first time I'm turning around there, I hate rejection. So if you reject me the first time, I'm done with you. I ain't got no time for you. Well, the thing about William was that it took 51 years in 1814, I think it was. He started when he was 28, and he didn't get in until he was in his 80s or 90s. And you gotta say, well, what in the world was going on at Mount Holly for that to happen to him? Well, until you understand this one point that I had to ask my good friend Bill about, I didn't understand it either. In the Quaker pollards, there's this business meeting, and they have to all what? Have consensus. And if you don't have consensus, guess what? No, can't happen. And I really didn't understand it until I think it was someone told me about the painting of the kitchen. That kitchen that's in there now. They said somebody wanted red and we didn't want red. We wanted just white, neutral colors. And it took 10 years for us to get, I don't know, 10 years, but I'm exaggerating a little bit. 10 years for us to come to a conclusion on something so simple, because all it takes is one person not cooperating. One person who can't see beyond their own selfishness to say, you know, this ain't right. This ain't what God would have me do. This is not treating my brother as myself. So I did a little calculation. There's 12 months in a year. Every month there's a business meeting. For 51 years, that's about 612, I think it is, times that if that vote came up, they told him no. But this is the thing about William. William didn't serve the religious organization. William had a relationship with his God and his creator, and he was told to be faithful, which he was. And so when you look at William Boen, and that was one of the things that me and Bill discovered. Actually, it was my wife who pointed it out to us. She said, for him to be at Mount Holly for 51 years and was not allowed to join, what does that say about the character of the man? And that's what you have to think about with William Boen. Him and Woolman and Bazette and Allison down in Burlington, they all had this inner drive to do the right thing in spite of, like Woolman, Boen wouldn't wear certain clothes made by slaves, but he was a poor man. He shouldn't be wearing whatever he could get. No, he had just that much integrity. I'm often reminded of the scripture that talks about the rich man that came to Jesus and said, well, God, I done did this and I done did that. And Jesus looked at him and said, well, sell all that you got. Just sell it all and follow me. He was like, nah, I don't think I could do that. I can't give up everything I had. But when you see the Woolmans and the Benzettes and the others of the Quakers that gave up what they had, they were self-sacrificing. That was another thing about Boen. He was self-sacrificing. He was humble. And when you think about that, that's qualities that we've been taught differently. You know, I grew up in the me, myself, and I, or me generation. And at that time, there were people who had that me attitude. And I'm gonna give you a famous case. We've all heard, give me liberty, give me death, right? Patrick Henry. Great, right? You know what he said to a Quaker? He said, look, guys, I know this is morally wrong, but I live good because of these people. And that's what was happening with a lot of people who may have owned slaves. Here in New Jersey, if you owned a slave, you got 60 acres of land. So guess what? It's in my interest to get more slaves, to get more land, and I could become wealthy. And so this is the dark side of what we never really hear about Quakers and the history of Quakers and what actually happened. So another example of this, manumissions. Quakers was starting with manumissions in Burlington and that swept across the country. Well, how long did it take for the Quakers to agree to finally manumit their slaves and then eventually give them up? Well, they had, I think, about 100 years, somewhere in that time frame, close to 100 years. I could be off today, but about 100 years it took them to finally move. And then when they did move, this is what was shocking me. I was working with Avis McClintock, and they got this book from Warner Mifflin, and he was talking about slavery and giving up the slaves and manumissions. And then I realized, based on what I saw in the book, that they weren't free right away. They didn't just get their freedom, they got their freedom much later, which meant that the best of their years was given over to the slave. Even though there was the promise of getting freedom, they didn't get it till much later, until they had used their best years to maintain it. And then they didn't get this word. Most people have never heard this word before, I don't think. Reparations. But when you read Woolman's journal, it's right there. He had a formula for reparations. But you don't hear people talking about Woolman and reparations, but it's there. So where was he coming from with that? He got a formula. I calculated it was like $30,000 per person. So, I mean, that would have been good money back then, right? But again, he was coming from a different place. Boen was coming from a different place. So when you download the document, you can look it up online, and it's spelled B-O-E-N, not B-O-W-E-N. You read the document and the accolades that they gave him. They said he followed Christ. He lived a judicious life. He was honorable. And they said, I guess it was his final 10 years before he died, that William Boen was faithful. Remember they told him to go be faithful? They said he was faithful throughout his whole life. So what William Boen represents, it doesn't matter where you start. It matters where you end and how you end. And you can have little to nothing, still be happy, still live a good life. But he was an example for all of us to strive for as far as faithfulness, honesty, truthfulness. And those are the things that he lived by. And in Christian terms, we call them the fruits of the Spirit. He lived by the fruits of the Spirit. And I'm going to close because I got more I could talk about, but another famous quote I want to close on is from one of my favorite Quaker writers. Let me find it. And his name is Edward Burroughs. And I read this before in a meeting, but I think it's important to Quakers today because I think sometimes we get off track and we get involved in discommitment. Like was said earlier, Broughton, it was a reservation. First time there was a reservation. Good idea, good intention. Nixon, good idea, good intentions. Hoover, good idea, good intentions, because they were Quakers, right? Got to put a Quaker in there. The Quakers said, well, it didn't quite work out that way, right? So Broughton said this. He said, we are not for names, nor men's, nor titles of government, nor are we for this party, nor against the other, because of its name and pretense. But we are for justice, mercy, and truth, and peace, and true freedom, that these may be exalted in our nation, and that goodness, righteousness, meekness, temperance, peace, unity with God and with another, that these things may abound, such as a government are we seeking and waiting for, wherein truth, righteousness, mercy, and justice, unity and love, and all the fruits of holiness may abound, and contrary be removed, cast out and limited. Edward Burroughs died in prison at the age of 29 for publicly voicing this truth. Excuse me. 1659. That's how long ago that was said. And so when I look at Quakers, you're that small community, that community that sits upon the hill, that's always been a witness. No matter what political party is in charge, the Quakers was always trying to do the right thing. It may have taken them 10 years to figure out which color they wanted to paint the building, but the point of it was it wouldn't have never happened. Down at Burlington, we have several abolitionists buried down there. And one of the abolitionists, I'm gonna get her name wrong, I think it's Grimke. But anyway, she wrote a letter to Lincoln. He had it on the chest. It was the Quakers of New Jersey and Philadelphia and the surrounding areas that was beating up Lincoln with a frying pan, telling him he's got to stop this slavery. I had a professor tell me once, he said that the Civil War wasn't a fight over slavery. It was economics and keeping the Union together. Lincoln himself said so. but it was our Quaker brethren who kept the faith, who kept the fight, and ended slavery. One of the other things, before he died on his deathbed, he said that, this is 1824, I'm sorry. He was saying, this is William Boen was saying that he and Woolman was advocates against slavery, and he hoped that the other Mount Holly people would come around. What we want to see an end, or what we want to see a change, sometimes takes time. Sometimes it takes a lifetime. But if you start off on the right foot, you'll end on the right foot. That's what William Boen did. Thank you.
So the purpose of our being here, and I think we should conclude with that formal announcement, and I refer you to this plaque, which will be engraved in stone at one point. It says, "This path is dedicated to the memory of William Boen and John Woolman, two Quakers, members of Mount Holly Friends Meeting, who in obedience to God, through their faith, friendship, and their unrelenting quest for freedom, forever changed the hearts and minds of Mount Holly Friends Meeting." So I hereby declare this path to be so dedicated here on November the 15th, 2025.
So at this point, we're inviting friends to respond to the video and also just share your experiences from Quaker worship.
Many of you have heard my reason to initially come to this meeting. I was raised Protestant growing up, and my husband was raised Catholic. And we sent our children to Quaker school. And I couldn't believe how they treated our children and gave them such respect. And I said to my husband, let's go check out the Quaker meeting. I knew Margaret Barnes belonged here, and I knew my children really loved her and adored her. So we came to the meeting. It took me a long time to become a member. Actually, it took me 18 years before I became a member. But if you understand how the Quakers run their meeting, it's hard to really understand from the get-go what Quaker really believes in or how they follow their faith. And so it was where my husband, even though he was raised Catholic and I was raised Protestant, we were on the same page when it came to the Quaker meeting. And I'm so grateful to be here.
My name is Karen Felias, and a little bit about my background. I came from an upbringing that was not very religious. Well, first I was asked to do this, and I said I'm not doing it unless somebody else does it. So thank you, Beth. I wanted to just preface it with that. But yeah, my parents didn't really raise us religiously, but yet we were all baptized at a church. And I remember so vividly being raised with the idea that we hold God in reverence and He's almighty, and yet He's very punishing. So it was very difficult for me as a child to find comfort in that. And this God that I was told to love and trust took people that I loved. I loved deeply, and so I was left lonely and frightened as a child. And so I turned away from that. I spent years searching, and about 35, 40 years ago, I found a group of people that practice the way the indigenous people practice their spiritual walk. And I felt this is where I belong. And I was, it was so many gifts from that experience. And I was so afraid that I would like stop and like go brain dead here. So I jotted some cheat sheets. Yeah, these people were practicing a spiritual way of life that connected all people and connected all things in nature. And that there was God in all of those things. There was a great spirit in all of those things. And we would humble ourselves and come together and surrender ourselves to the spirit. And a lot of healing took place amongst those people. A lot of spiritual growth, a lot of self-awareness came. It was certainly a way to get the human ego out of the way we practiced, because there was definitely a higher source of energy and power, more than humans could withstand. And they had a respect for the natural elements of the earth, and we did our best to protect those. We did our best to think about the generations that come after us, and we did our best to think about those that were in greater need than we were. And so we always prayed for others before we prayed for ourselves. And that was so fulfilling spiritually. And then around 10 years ago, this group started slowly dispersing. People passed away, people got ill, people moved away, and this circle sort of splintered off. And it took me a while to find another circle. And then one day, about 7 years ago, I think, I walked into this door and was immediately greeted with love and compassion and total acceptance. I was greeted by people from different walks of life, different spiritual backgrounds, and it was so reminiscent to our circles that I practiced for so many years. I had a friend who was lifelong Quaker, and he and I would have many discussions on spiritual matters, and I found that through our discussions there were so many similarities, that we walked the same walk, that we spoke to the same God, and that same God spoke to us. And so when the indigenous way passed its regular practice, I came here. And this place has been such a blessing. It has been such a blessing. And I still get choked up when I think about how much of a blessing. There was just this acceptance of my spiritual journey. And this meeting has helped me so much in that journey. And when I listen to people share when God speaks to them, it just reinforces my history of practicing the way indigenous people practice. For me, this is just a reminder that the spiritual growth continues, the journey continues. I listen to the way the Quakers want to take care of the earth and take care of those less fortunate and take care of each other, and realizing that we are all related and that you are my brothers and sisters, as well as those trees that were first planted here, and that all the things in nature are still my brothers and sisters and my family. And, as Sue said, I found a family here. I found a home. And Quakers have been around for a long time, so I'm guessing that this building will stay for a long time. So yeah, I am just grateful for this meeting place.
I have a question about the video. I was wondering who did Bill's makeup. I was really impressed on how he looked. He looked really young. Was it AI or what? Whoever did the video did a great job. I was really impressed with that. And I'd just like to say, one of the things since I've started coming to Mount Holly was the friendship. The Quakers are known as being friends. And that's one of the things that has been impressed upon me. It was a friendly environment. I came from an environment where blacks and whites didn't go to church together. And walking in here the first day was a little bit nerve-wracking because I didn't know what to expect. And one of the first persons that I met said something to me that if I was a little bit sensitive, I could have taken it the wrong way. His name was Toby Riley. And Toby was always trying to poke you with something or had something smart to say. And I mentioned him because one of the things about coming to Mount Holly is also one of the sad things about being at Mount Holly. I have lost a lot of friends. And watching the video, I saw Miss Sue. She was a good friend. So it's been my family away from my family in North Carolina with all the good people that I've met here. And I just thank you for being my friends. Sorry, Bill, I had to pick at you, but that's friendship for you.
It's been a good day. Thank you. Thank you for coming. We have one more thing. Dee Gavel from Haddonfield Meeting, who's rescued us a couple times already today with her technology wisdom, is going to sing a song.
I wasn't sure what to play today, and I'm really not sure. Is it just one piece you want, or? Yes, I have a request. Okay. Okay, that's what I was thinking about. So this is the 250th anniversary here, but I am a member of Haddonfield Meeting, and we had our 300th anniversary back in, was that 2021? So I wrote this song for, oh, you know what, I need a capo too. So I wrote this song for that meeting, and I figured this would be a good one to share here today. So let me put this here. There is that of God in each of us. There's a light that shines in all, making bright for all the way of truth, to guide us lest we fall. Who can find the way alone? Who can see the path unknown? The light of others we are given, so to kindle each our own. There is nothing so well hidden as is that we shall not see. We must be Christ to one another, and eyes to others be. Who can find the way alone? Who can see the path unknown? The light of others we are given, so to kindle each our own. Open our eyes, God, show us the way. Open our ears, God, to hear your word. Open our hearts, God, to feel the love and peace peace you gave us to share. There is that of God in each of us. There's a light that shines for all, making bright for all the way of truth, to guide us lest we fall. So I didn't start my journey as a Quaker, and I've been through like a lot of different experiences. And let me bring this. What's that? I'm just trying to find one. There is. Can you hold this for just a second? I'm trying to find one piece. So there is one piece that I wrote. I've heard people mention other ways of worshiping, and let me just find it. So there. So I wrote this one a few years ago. I went from Christian to pagan, et cetera, et cetera. And I wrote one piece a few years ago, just kind of seeing turmoil and recognizing that in calling out to a creator, there's many different ways to do it. So this song is called This Is a Song, and that's what it speaks to, the different ways of reaching out to the divine, and in particular in kind of a troubled time. So let's do this one. This is a song for a nation that is tired, and a prayer for a country that has tried. This is a spell for a people who have cried. This is a song, this is a prayer, this is a spell. This is a song to bring healing to our earth, and a prayer for the cleansing of our air. This is a spell to use the power of fire rightly. This is a song, this is a prayer, this is a spell. This is a song to the water that will cleanse, and a prayer to the water that gives life. This is a spell for the waters of rebirth. This is a song, this is a prayer, this is a spell. For a people who have longed to live in peace, for the creatures who haven't got a voice, for the gods and the goddesses who watch in disbelief. Can we try? Can we strive to do better? This is a song and a hope that we will change, and a prayer. And before it is too late, this is a spell for us all to make our world a world that we are proud to leave our children. This is a song, this is a prayer, this is a spell.